Well, hey there, church. As I was prepping for this video, I was trying to think of what can I say to offer you some encouragement today. And one of the things I've been working on with this lovely weather that we've been having is putting in a small flower bed in our front yard, right outside of our entryway. And it made me think about when I was just out of high school. I spent a few seasons working as a personal gardener for Kern and Elizabeth Hendricks and a couple other people over the seasons. And through that time in my life, I learned an absolute ton about plants, how to grow them properly, how to transplant them, how to deadhead in the fall, all these sorts of things that have come into play in this time of my life. And it made me think of a passage in Scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. It says, "There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot." So yes, there is a time for everything, even a time for pandemics, for COVID-19, for quarantine. So what kind of time is it though? Now surely as we look at those first two verses, that this is, for some, a time to be born and a time to die. But for the vast majority of us, it's not. We've already been born and it's not quite our time to die. But what about the other two? Now, when I was gardening, I was given this as a gift. It's called a hori-hori knife, and it is a gardening tool that allows you to dig, but also to cut. And I remember the first time that I had to uproot something and transplant it somewhere else. And Elizabeth told me that I needed to cut the plant in half to divide it into two. And as I put the knife to the plant, my first gut instinct was, well, I'm going to kill it. Cutting something in half usually kills it if it's alive. But for plants, it's a necessary thing. By cutting the plant in half, you stimulate the growth and get two plants that will eventually grow bigger. Sometimes when we need to uproot something out of our lives, it's because it just doesn't belong there at all. Such as this grass in my yard. It just needs to be pulled and removed entirely. Perhaps this is a time for you to uproot something. Maybe there's some misplaced energy that you've been spending in a place that just doesn't work anymore. Such was the case for these peony plants. A few years ago, we had cut down a large maple tree in the backyard, and the stump was still out there, and we had found that there was these peony plants growing inside of the roots. Quite amazing that they had triumphed through that bad growing situation. But if they were ever going to be a full-grown plant, it was time to uproot them and plant them somewhere else. Which brings us now to planting. When we plant something new in the ground, there's a few things that are important to get right in order to get things to grow. One of those is soil. The soil has to be good for the plant. As you can see, there's a lot of rocks in my soil. Now, if I were to plant just in this soil, plants might not do so well depending on what kind of plant they are. So I had to add additional compost, things that brought life to the plant. So when we plant things in our lives, what kind of soil are we planting them in? When we talk about adding new habits to our lives, like a daily devotional like we did for Lent, or praying more, what kind of soil are we building those habits into? Are we setting ourselves up for failure? or success. Perhaps instead of committing to reading an entire chapter of the Bible in a day, maybe a better habit would be to read one verse in the morning after you brush your teeth and to meditate on it for a few minutes. Another important part about growing plants and planting things in our life is properly watering them. Now, it's easy to understand when we're talking about watering plants what that means, but when we talk about watering things that we've planted in our life, what does that mean? And what I think it is that it's about the continual rejuvenation of the things that we've added to our lives. Some of the things that this could be would be like an accountability partner that's helping you to continue in that good thing that you're doing, whether it's a Bible study partner that you're working with, someone in your small group who's praying with you on a regular basis, just someone checking in regularly. These things that we do on a regular basis that continually help to grow those things in our lives are crucial, and without them, much like plants, those things that we're trying to do end up just withering. So make sure that you are watering the things you're planting. So what do we gain from all this planting and uprooting? Well, for me, instead of looking at a rocky yard when I let the dog out, I get to see the beauty of plants and flowers. And it's the same for us. When we plant good things in our lives and uproot things that are either bad or misplaced, we take a barren part of our life and return it to something beautiful, a garden of sorts. Now, this Lent, we talked about the biggest story, where the snake crusher is returning us to the garden. Now, we talked about how the fall happened and how Adam and Eve were in this garden and it was taken from them. And then we see through the Old Testament how God was working in the people of the Israelites. And then Easter, we see how the snake crusher crushes the head of the snake. And now we're in the final part, where God is using his people, planting a garden in them, and will one day bring us back to the beauty of the garden that Adam and Eve enjoyed. It's the greatest story ever told, and we get to be part of it. So this week, in the coming weeks, my question for you is, what are you planting? And what are you uprooting? Plant something beautiful, church. We'll see you soon.
Anthony, I got a great idea. Instead of where's Waldo, it's where's Lynette.
All right, so it's important to know when you should be planting your roses and when you should be cutting your roses down. No, don't cut your roses down unless you really hate them, but roses are great. Mom, where are you? Are you going to help me with a shot or what? Mom, you fell asleep reading Bible trivia? Oh,